we can understand your glory and become attracted to your loving and merciful heart. Hare Krishna. So today is Yatra, and I've been reading and contemplating today about how Srila Prabhupada worked extremely not just hard but resourcefully to make the Satyatra festival spread all over the world. So I do this in three parts. First, I will talk about the setting of the first Rath Yatra festival, as well as a few Rath Yatras that Srila Prabhupada, that were ahead of Srila Prabhupada's guidance and presence. And then we'll talk about what this tells us about Srila Prabhupada and about the character of a great devotee, of a pure devotee. And lastly, we'll see about what we can learn from this at our level of the practice of bhakti. When Srila Prabhupada went to America, it was an act of hope. If someone has no experience in business, then it is not a business. It's not the invested an entire fortune or savings. It's not like they would mortgage their house and put all their jewelry, everything, just for that charity business. Why? Because there's no track record, there's no knowledge in the world. These taking as a spectacular. So we generally give us 6% track record. So if great management is going on, then good participant, they can calculate risks. Because there will be a over there. If I get a shot, even if it doesn't go over the body, at least I won't get caught. And that's a sign of intelligence. But sometimes, a person comes to a situation where they have nothing to lose. Suppose a match is almost lost, and then there's just one player there to bat. And then let's just throw my bat around and do what I can. And even if I get out, that's what was expected. If I can just focus on the balance and if you want a spectacular victory, then that's amazing. So why I'm talking about this example, Srila Prabhupada went to America. Taking the business example, Prabhupada had no track record of success in outreach. Everything that he had tried had not lived up to the expectation or even close to the expectation for that matter. None of his outreach initiatives had led to any tangible results for him, except one, of course, which was his books. He had written the Bhagavatam, which had translated the Bhagavatam, which had been appreciated by many powerful people Even the Prime Minister, even the President of India had written a review of the book, appreciating it and recommending it for all libraries. But Prabhupada had found that that was only cosmetic, in the sense that not many people were taking the book, actually not many libraries were actually taking it, and even those who were taking hardly anyone was reading it. Prabhupada didn't just want to be an author. Prabhupada wanted to be a transformative spiritual teacher. He would have stayed in India and he would have, after writing one book, he would have kept writing many more books. And he would have been quite successful as a spiritual author. But if Prabhupada decided to go to America, he had, in one sense, nothing to lose. He had renounced his family, he had given up his career, and while he had nothing with him, it also meant he had nothing to lose. And then it was a last-ditch effort. So, this is how Srila Prabhupada came to America. And when he reached there, I just go over quickly in San Francisco, the first chapter was there. But we just go over the geography. Prabhupada came to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is near New York. And from there, Prabhupada went to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia he went to New York. And in New York, after almost a year of struggle, Prabhupada started the first center, that was Angelus Gift, which is even now out there, the 22nd Avenue storefront is there. Now during this time, when the risks which were like quite dramatic. The first was that Prabhupada realized he was going to get no death from India at all. He knew that from his God family was not going to get any help. But while he was in India, he had spoken on many occasions, and many pious, wealthy people had appreciated his saintliness, his earnestness, his scholarliness, and Prabhupada had support whenever he had wanted. At that time in India, he did not have any big project like building a temple. His focus was on going to the West. But there were well-wishers whom he had connected with and cultivated in India, and they had said that they would offer some support from India. But at that time, foreign exchange was very difficult to get. To take currency out of India was very, very difficult for various geopolitical and economic reasons. And it became clear that it was just not going to work. So, Prabhupada had said that please send them small funds and we'll start a storefront. And then later on we'll build a temple. But his sponsor wanted to have that religious pride of building a temple. And he wanted a traditional architecture. Probably he also wanted to get bragging rights in his social circles. I have sponsored the building of a temple in America. And having a storefront is not particularly impressive. So he said it won't be possible to them. So if it had been anyone else, that could have been the nail in the coffin. It's like, a general goes into the enemy territory deep and is launching a courageous attack. But the general is not going with the army, the general is going all alone. And the general asks for some small help from the base camp, from the country. Sometimes now, with wars going on in the world, there is so much talk about espionage and intelligence security penetration. So Prabhupada was in America and he was told that there's no help possible from India. That could have been morale shattering. But Prabhupada's conviction to serve came from his relationship with Krishna, from his relationship with the spiritual master. And thus he was not discouraged. The second thing that happened was that it was almost the least likely audience became the most interested audience for the Prabhupada. What do I mean by that? If you see generally Indians whenever they go abroad, outside the Indians are hardworking, tax paying, law abiding. They generally do well wherever they go. So often Indians, especially those who are educated, they stay in the relatively safe and at least middle class or upper class part of the localities. Now Prabhupada initially was hosted by one such Indian American couple, but they were not at all spiritually interested. And even in those days, yoga was slowly becoming popular, and there were people who were interested in yoga, but that was in New York, but they were also more interested in physical comfort and relief, not so much spiritual growth. Prabhupada went to a couple of universities and gave talks, and he found that the interest was only academic. So, all the typical potential audiences, whether it is the pious people, the well-to-do people, the educated people, none of them seem to be interested. And Prabhupada got to the least likely audience, so that was the counterculture. These were people who their appearance would be considered not respectable even by Western standards, what do we speak of traditional Indian standards. And they were into drugs. In fact, you could say that it was a regulatory principle for them to break all regulatory principles. They didn't even know there were such principles, but they were living that way. And yet, what Prabhupada saw within them was a spiritual spark, an interest in spirituality. Krishna is Bhavagrahi, and those who are devoted to Krishna are also meant to be Bhavagrahi. And it is in this phase of Srila Prabhupada's life that we see this most prominently in Prabhupada. And if Prabhupada had not been an essence seeker, there's essence and there's nonsense. So that if Prabhupada had not been an essence seeker, he would have dismissed the counterculture people who were also known famously as hippies. Although the counterculture was a larger group, the hippies was a smaller group within them. But the hippies were the most visible. So Prabhupada found that they had spiritual interest, although their hairstyle, their dress style, their lifestyle, everything seemed to be violently opposed to what might be considered by a traditional Indian sadhu to be the way a spiritual seeker should be living. Just to give an example of the kind of people that Prabhupada had to deal with. Now I am bringing this as a background to talk about what was the audacity of Srila Prabhupada in starting the yatra in America. So in those times, when people would take drugs, they would take LSD. And LSD is the name of a chemical, but they had renamed it as anybody who takes LSD joins the League of Spiritual Discovery. So the drug was seen as a means for gaining spiritual insight. And when a person would take LSD and speak thereafter, it was seen as if that person was getting some special insights from an alternative mystical domain, and that was being spoken. So such a person would be called as an LSD saint. And such a person, if they are speaking, it would be considered outrageous and offensive to stop the person from speaking. So Prabhupada would sometimes be giving a class, and right in the middle of the class, somebody would be just coming down from LSD and going up in the volume and the content of whatever they were blabbering. And Prabhupada just talking to you. So it was at one level a very improbable audience that Prabhupada had. But what he saw in the audience, while they were not respectful to him, especially the talks were going on in general, the way a saintly person should be respected, or even an elderly person, or to speak of saintly person, should be respected. But what Prabhupada saw within them was the spark of spiritual inquiry, and that spark was ready to challenge conventional conceptions. And now, third thing that happened. So Prabhupada focused on them because he saw that they were open to something extraordinary, something radical, something revolutionary. And what Srila Prabhupada was offering them was indeed something like that. Now, the third thing that happened was that while these people seemed sincere in the sense that they were at least interested, but they were extremely unpredictable. So that was because sometimes they would relapse into drugs, and then what would happen, nobody would know. Prabhupada had a shocking experience where a person who seemed to be likely to be his student, his first Western disciple, had attacked them. So you just come up and continue.
Flow of the point that I was making, and then we'll move forward from there. So, I was talking about the challenges Srila Prabhupada faced when he went to America. So, I was giving the example of military. If somebody is going into another country, now they would expect some support. So one thing was Prabhupada got no support, neither no financial support, no support in the people, nothing he got. Not only that, in one sense he had no respectable audience in America. Normally we would expect that, okay, if I'm going all the way there, at least somebody respectable would be there, but there was no respectable audience also. And the third thing was that the audience that he got, it was not only not respectable, it was not even no respectable or respectful audience with this. They had their own ideas. There is that incident that some of you may be aware. Prabhupada was sitting, at that time there was no Vyasas or anything like that. So the devotees had constructed just like a wooden platform in 22nd Avenue where they would sit, Prabhupada would sit. And it was a creaky platform. So every time when Prabhupada would climb up, the devotees, some of the people had become religious, they would hold their breath, wasn't going to crack. So Prabhupada would sit on that and he would talk. And one day Prabhupada was giving a class and suddenly somebody from the audience just got up and came straight and sat next to him and said, I want to speak. And Prabhupada said, question answers after the class. No, I want to speak. Now, Prabhupada didn't want to offend that person, but at the same time, who knows what they were going to speak. So Prabhupada looked at him, twice he said, question answer after, no, I want to speak. Then Prabhupada just picked up a kartal and started singing. And everybody started following, and that person just stood watching. So now, Prabhupada was absorbed in Kirtan, but those who were a little respectful of Prabhupada, were little followers, they were wondering, this person sitting next to Prabhupada, what will he do? You know, people are unpredictable when they are under the influence of drugs or even when they are coming out of the influence of drugs. But Prabhupada sat there, closed his eyes and led Kirtan. And Prabhupada always had this mood that there should be, whatever we do, some prasad should be there. So at those days, they would just get some, Prabhupada had very little Lakshmi with him. So they would just get some apples and Prabhupada would cut the apples and he would give everyone a slice of apple. Now, so after Kirtan got over, a devotee brought the apple, Prabhupada cut the apple, and then with everyone watching, Prabhupada stretched out his hand. And his hand, one side was the apple, the other side was the knife. Now, what will that person become? Everybody waited with bated breath. And Prabhupada was calm, completely undisturbed. He stretched out his hand, and then that person stretched out his hand. He looked at Prabhupada, he looked at the hand, he looked at the knife, he looked at the apple, he looked at Prabhupada, and then he reached out and he picked up the apple. Everybody breathed a sigh of relief. So, Prabhupada, it was not so much that people could understand what he was speaking, but it was his character, his kindness, his compassion, at the same time his firmness, his faith, that people saw. And that's how slowly they started becoming attracted. But before this had happened, I was telling this incident that when there was one particular person, one David Allen, he seemed to be likely to become the first, what Prabhupada wrote in a letter to one of his supporters from India, that he might become the first American Vaishnava. And he told Swamiji, I want to become your disciple, I want to come with you to India, I want to learn bhakti. He seemed to be very interested and very sincere. But one day, he took drugs again. He used to take drugs before, he had given it up. He took drugs again and he just went crazy. And at that time, Prabhupada did not have his own place. So Prabhupada was sharing one space with this person. He was on stage on the other side and Prabhupada was on this side. And in that drug-induced mania, he just charged toward Prabhupada. Now, Prabhupada, so look at him. Prabhupada saw that there was no sense or no chance that he would calm down. Just went crazy. And Prabhupada tried to reason with him, it didn't happen. Prabhupada just immediately left. And now, Prabhupada was 70, he was a young person, he was energized by drugs. Somehow, Prabhupada came out and he's in the streets. And these were not ordinary streets. When Prabhupada first came to America, at that time, and first he had to come to the Lower East Side. So he was staying in more upstate New York, more prosperous part of New York. So the people there said, Swamiji, this is not a place for you to even visit, what to speak of staying. America is among the few countries in the world where citizens can have guns. And it's not just guns, people can have automatic rifles. And their idea is that we need guns not just to protect ourselves from thieves. We need guns to protect ourselves from the government. That means, for their memory is that British, when they were colonizing, the government turned tyrannical against them. So their memory is that, their idea is that the citizen should be strong enough to teach the government a lesson if the government does anything bad. That's why ordinary citizens have weapons, and quite deadly weapons at that. So they told Swami, there are people here with guns and some of them are trigger happy. So you cannot go there. Prabhupada said, that is where people are interested in Krishna, they go there. And not only did Prabhupada go there, but Prabhupada didn't just stay in his room waiting for someone to come. Prabhupada was so courageous that he would go out for walks. Now, in many ways, his walking was his advertising. Because he had no funds at that time to do any kind of advertising. So just the sight of him walking on the streets of New York, especially the Lower East Side, it was a remarkable sight. Now, of course, New Yorkers have the remarkable ability of treating everything extraordinary as not extraordinary. That means what? Everybody was doing crazy things, the Swamiji seemed to be doing something else. So people would not pay much attention. One devotee told me that first time he saw devotees dancing on the streets and he saw somebody wearing a dhoti. He said that, I thought this is an oversized diaper. So people had no idea what was going on. I was in Australia and I met one, I was supposed to give a class, it was a Western Outreach Center. We have a temple on top of a hill. A lot of local Aussie people come. So the Kirtan had got over the Aarti and Mangalacharan was going on. So at that time one middle-aged Aussie lady, she was there, she says, can I ask you a question? Yes. She says, when the conch is blown, why does everyone kiss the floor? So, for them, they had no understanding of practically anything. But then, in such an audience, when Prabhupada went, so you could say that if you consider the war metaphor, he had no support from inside. He had not been able to form any alliances over there, like with respectable people. And then the people who were supporting him were also quite unreliable, unpredictable, not necessarily bad people. They were certainly sincere, just unreliable. But it's in this context that Srila Prabhupada started. So, he started in New York. And after the first center was established in New York, some people, how the first people came, that's also remarkable. Prabhupada was walking on there are many people who would come, but none of them were really very serious. But then one time he was walking on the streets of New York, and there was one young man. He was an English professor, or he had the educational qualification to be an English professor, but he was living the life of a hippie, Howard Wheeler. And he was walking by, he had been to India with his friend Keith Ward, and he had been in search of a guru. But he had been very disappointed because he found that those Indians who seemed to be very spiritually advanced in the Himalayas and other places, they didn't know English. And those Indians who knew English didn't seem to be spiritual at all. So they came back disappointed. But he had some understanding of a sannyasi. Now it's interesting, in America, Orange, I was going for a walk with a couple of devotees in the morning, and it was a college campus. So then three of us, the brahmacharis were walking along, and the college kids were going, hey, so in America, orange is the dress of the color of the prisoners. so they asked, hey, have you guys escaped from a prison? So the devotee says, yeah, please don't tell anyone. So people had no idea what was going on, but this Hagrid Prabhu, who later became Hagrid Prabhu, Howard, he had been to India, so he knew what a sannyasi was. So Prabhupada was walking on the streets, and going one way, and Howard was going to meet his friend Keith, and both of them were going to take drugs. And he was walking along, and he was looking here, looking there, and suddenly he saw on the other side of the streets a Swami. He's written the book, so he's written his memoir also. He said, I started thinking, have I already taken drugs? Have I already gone high? What is going on over here? He looked and he saw the Swami was still there. And then the big lorry passed by. And the lorry passed by. He thought, will the Swami still be there? He saw the Swami was still there. Then another lorry passed by on the road. And then he looked again and he saw not only the Swami was there, the Swami had stopped and was looking at him. And then he waited for the next lorry to pass by and he crossed over. And he saw Swami was looking at him and smiling. And he came there. Swami, are you from India? He says, Swami, are you from India? And Prabhupada said, yes. And you? He says, I have been to India. And they started talking. And what struck Hagrid Prabhu, who later became Hagrid Prabhu at that time, Howard, was that Swamiji seemed so out of place in New York and still completely at peace in New York. These lorries were going by, they was giving out shots of smoke coming out and loud noise. The Prabhupada is completely peaceful. The roadside is not a typical place you would think for having a philosophical chat. But Prabhupada, they had a very nice discussion. Now, Prabhupada came from the tradition where Krishna had a philosophical chat on the battlefield. So a roadside is no big deal. So then he said, then Prabhupada said, and they walked with him, or he told Prabhupada said, walk with me, and Prabhupada showed him Matchless Gift Shop. He says, here I take talks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings. And then he said, yeah, I'll come and I'll bring my friends also. So those were the people who were the first people who became a little serious afterwards. And then some of them, they were gradually introduced. So there was Sam, who later became Shyam Sundar, and Michael, who became Mukunda Maharaj. So both of them, there were two places in America, New York and San Francisco, where the counterculture was very prominent. And they said that, Swamiji, you have got a good audience here, you will get a good audience there also. So we will go there and we will prepare the ground for you to come. Prabhupada said, okay. And now both of these, Mukunda Maharaj and the Mukunda Prabhu at that time and Shyam Sundar Prabhu, both of them were very adventurous kind of people. They like to do big things. So when they went there, then at that time they met various people, and Prabhupada's kirtans, Hare Krishna Mantra, the musical meditation, musical chant, that was quite attractive. So they had also learned the singing, and they would sing and they would attract people. And then they invited Prabhupada to come there. And this was the first time Prabhupada took a flight. Prabhupada had gone all the way from India to America by ship. So now America is quite a large country. It is larger than India also. So go from one coast to another coast is more than 3 hours. 3 hours it takes, more than that. So Prabhupada came to San Francisco, and when he came, they had arranged that many of the people they were told that Swami is coming. So therefore, they were all there at the airport, and they were all doing kirtans at the airport. And in those days, before 9/11, security was not that high. So you could actually, in some cases, go right up to the airplane. So sometimes when the devotees had some influence, the Kirtan party would be right. Prabhupada would come out of the airplane. You may have seen some pictures or some old videos. Prabhupada is coming out and they were doing Kirtans. So, this was not that case, but as soon as Prabhupada is coming out, before that only he started hearing Kirtans. And Prabhupada was delighted that he had not even spoken one word, and he came out and 40-50 people were singing. Prabhupada was delighted. Then there was a brief talk that Prabhupada gave outside the airport itself. And Prabhupada saw this as a very auspicious sign. And the Prabhupada, what happened was that he could sense the pulse of the people over here. So in general, these people were the people who came there. The counterculture was the idea that the mainstream culture is all rotten. That people say, okay, you work hard, get a job, get a family, earn a living, all this. You've seen our elders do that. Nobody seems to be happy with all this. So why should we do all this? So they wanted to do something different. So when Prabhupada saw that these people were there, they also wanted to do something adventurous. So Prabhupada did not present Krishna consciousness as a set of rules. Do this and do this. The rules were there. But more than the rules, the whole idea of Krishna consciousness was adventure. And adventure, outer adventure and inner adventure. Outer adventure means you do amazing new things. Where the devotees would go out, the hippies would like to do many crazy things. But even they didn't think of doing kirtans outdoors. So yeah, people would have musical concerts in places sometimes. But they were in particular places. Here, just doing outdoor singing. And Prabhupada encouraged that. But then, when Prabhupada in San Francisco, this was a couple of years later, 1965 Prabhupada went to America, 1966 he started ISKCON in New York, the Lower East Side. And then now, things slowly started moving in 1968. So Prabhupada in San Francisco, and at that time, Prabhupada says that actually a devotee is always seeing Krishna everywhere. Can we look at this verse? This verse very beautifully reminds Prabhupada. So, if you have this book, you can go to the page 240 in the book. This is a book which is Gita verses and prayers inspired by Gita verses. So, page 240, text 6.30. So if you don't have, you can look at the here also. So you can repeat after me. My dear Lord, let me see you. With my mind's eye. With my body's eye. And my mind's eye. Does this prayer remind you of something? A prayer that is sung today? Yes. Today Jagannath Yatra, that's what we sing, Jagannatha Swami. Nayana Pathagami Bhavatamayi. Nayana Pathagami means, my dear Lord, may you come on the path of my eyes. It's a very esoteric prayer. It is not so much, not that we are saying that, let me look at you. The prayer's meaning, mood is that, wherever I look, my dear Lord, please you appear. May you always be on the path of my eyes, so that my eyes don't get distracted, my eyes don't distract me from you. So, as a similar, let me see you we want to see with the body's eye, but more importantly, with our mind's eye. We see many things in the world, but few things register. And we will meet many people, but some people might be extraordinarily attractive, some people might be extraordinarily repulsive. Maybe they are very disagreeable, very short-tempered, very rude, whichever way. Generally, we tend to remember the extremes. They create some impressions. And then, even if our body's eye is not seeing something, still in the mind's eye it remains. So, in bhakti we often say a cardinal principle is to remember Krishna. भगवान को याद करो, पर याद करने के लिए यादें चाहिए. How will you remember if you don't have any memories? So those memories, those are formed generally in some extraordinary situations. Generally, the ordinary is forgettable. The extraordinary is unforgettable, or at least less forgettable. So that's why within the spiritual tradition, when there is remembrance of Krishna, there is a combination. We have things that we do daily. And they also create remembrance, but they create remembrance by repetition. So if you keep doing something again and again and again, it becomes reinforced within us. Suppose we're staying in a house, we've stayed for many days over there, many months. Even if it's completely dark, as the power goes off, we know where to walk, where the door is, where something is. So repetition also creates recollection. Repetition of the same thing creates recollection. But simultaneously, it is the experience of something which is extraordinary, not ordinary and repeated. That also creates memories and enables recollection. So bhakti aids us in remembrance in both ways. So festivals of Rath Yatra fall, like Rath Yatra, follow the second technique. We'll discuss how. But let's recite this verse. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra.
Yo mam pashyati sarvatra.
Sarvam cha mai pashyati.
Sarvam cha mai pashyati.
Tasyaham na pranashyami.
Tasyaham na pranashyami.
Sacha me na pranashyati.
Sacha me na pranashyati.
Those who see me in all and all in me, their bond of love with me will forever be. I always dwell in them and they in me. Never am I lost to them, nor they in me. Bhagavad Gita 6.30. So this was actually Prabhupada. He went to America, but he was never infatuated by America. He was never bewildered by America. He was seeing even in America the opportunity to remember Krishna, and not just remember Krishna himself, remind others of Krishna. So would anyone like to read it?
My dear Lord,
Yeah.
my dear Lord, this vision of seeing you everywhere and seeing everything in you, of seeing you in everything and everything in you, is so exalted that it feels almost impossible. Indeed, I am so caught in the illusions of the world and the distractions of my mind that I barely see you, even when you are right in front of me.
So basically, let's look at this. So we were discussing about these three things. That Prabhupada was lacking a lot, but what he had was that conviction in serving Krishna. And that conviction came from a vision. That's what we are trying to understand. The point I was making is that remembrance, when we remember something, that can happen in two ways. Repetition. Repetition creates memories. Now often these are slow and subtle. When you do something again and again, if you drive a car regularly. Initially when you are driving a car, there are so many things to do. I have to look in this window, also look in this window, look ahead also, and put the leg over here, not put the leg over there, look at the speed, move this. How can I do all these things? But if you keep doing it, what happens? You get used to it. And then not only can we do it all fairly effortlessly, you can also talk with others while doing it. So repetition creates memories. That's one way. So in one sense, repetition of the ordinary, that creates memories for us. But along with that, there is the experience of the extraordinary. There's the experience of the extraordinary, and that also creates memories. This also creates memories. Now these are fast and we could say these are sharp or clear memories of him. So today Rath Yatra is there. Now, if you come for a satsang program like this, you may come for many programs. Some of them you may remember, some of you may not remember. But if you are coming regularly for programs like this, know that even if you don't remember the specific points, if you have spoken in a specific talk, but the overall ambience, the overall idea of coming and singing about Krishna, hearing about Krishna, speaking about Krishna, that creates some impression, that gives us a sense of community and comfort, right? But suppose you go to a festival like Rath Yatra, and not here, you go to Jagannath. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people are there. Where as far as you see, there's just an ocean of people. And just being in that crowd, maybe waiting for one glimpse of Jagannath. And if somehow you get close and you pull the chariot, that is such an extraordinary experience. It also creates memories for us. So, Srila Prabhupada says that now as I said, one of the principles of bhakti is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. But Prabhupada takes it in a very interesting way in the book called The Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Siddhi. He says it is not enough for the Guru to tell you should remember Krishna. Actually, it is not just the disciple's responsibility to remember Krishna, it is the Guru's responsibility to provide facilities for the disciple to remember Krishna. It's a two-way process. Like if the teacher says, study this maths. The teacher just gives a book to the student, study now. But if the book is difficult to understand. Okay, if I have some questions, where do I go? You figure it out, don't be dumb. No, the student may not be dumb, but the student will have to become dumb. What do you do at that time, isn't it? They will not be able to do anything. So, it's not enough just to tell somebody what to do, they have to be given support. So, Prabhupada was constantly thinking about ways in which he could help people to remember Krishna. And thus, when he was in New York, he was one day chanting, and through a miraculous set of events, Jagannath had appeared over there. So I started by telling about how he did not get any support from India. And because he did not get any support from India, Prabhupada more or less dropped the idea of deity worship. So Prabhupada said that this is the Sankirtan movement, and let us do Sankirtan. And they would have some simple pictures. And the pictures also were often what were purchased from local pawn shops or antique shops or something like that. Whatever was available, they got it. And so in New York, there was no altar, formal altar. There's just pictures. Pictures are also a form of altar, but there are no deities. When they go to San Francisco, some of his disciples had gone to a nearby, is the word pawn shop used over here, like a second-hand shop?
Yes.
So they had gone to a shop and they found something which seemed to be like esoteric, far out Indian. And they thought, Swamiji will like it. So they just bought it and kept it. Swamiji, I got something for you. And what is it? Prabhupada was sitting behind his desk and they just kept it in front of Swamiji. Prabhupada got off and he offered full pranam. They went, what is this? It was like a small figurine and with large eyes, and there didn't seem to be any ears. The arms didn't seem to be proper. They thought this is a bit weird, unfinished kind of sculpt image. And Prabhupada offered obeisance. What is this? What is this? Prabhupada said, this is the Lord of the universe. And they look at this and the Lord of the universe. They just couldn't figure it out. No, later on, one devotee, he wrote so I'm going a little bit ahead, but I just to give a cultural context. So then eventually Prabhupada told the devotees, okay, this is Jagannath. I said, you go back to the store and there might be two more other images. And they found Baldev and Subhadra also. They got all of them. And he told one of his disciples, okay, can you make larger images of these? So they decided to they made the images. And then Prabhupada had the first Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra at temple, they had an altar with the deities. So when that happened, then slowly Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, the deities started coming in other temples also. Radha Krishna deities came later. So now, when this happened, at this time, in the books that had been published till now, there's Bhagavad Gita had been published, some Back to God, Mahisha had been published. Ishopanishad had been, I don't need to, Prabhupada had written it, it was not available. So whatever books were available, the Bhagavatam first few volumes were available. There's no mention much of Jagannath. Now in the Bhagavatam, in the pastime of Lord Chaitanya that is described in the introduction, there is some mention of Jagannath. But it's not very clear. So one devotee, there's a letter he wrote to Prabhupada. He was from Philadelphia. Philadelphia had Jagannath deities at that time. He says, Swamiji, I said Prabhupada by that time, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, I'm very carefully worshipping the deities as you have told us and as I have learned. But I have a question for you. Can you tell me who is it that I am worshipping? Because what happened for them, they knew what Krishna, they knew what Lord Chaitanya. But who is this form that they are worshipping? So they had no idea. But this is the power of a great devotee, that a devotee can infuse that faith and attraction. And Prabhupada was such a wonderful person, and they wanted to please Prabhupada. So Prabhupada wants these deities to be worshipped. This is the way to worship, and they also get worshipped accordingly. So that's how this whole process started over there. And Prabhupada was always thinking of ways in which to engage the devotees. So for us, often when Krishna is in front of us, also can't see him. So the pure devotees, the exalted gurus, they try to create ways by which we can try to remember him. Who would like to read? Next paragraph.
Even when I behold your beautiful form as the deity, I fail to truly see you. Instead, I see only my desires, and I see you only to the extent that I believe you can fulfill those desires.
Yes. I was in America a couple of years ago, and I was doing a college program. After that, one boy came to me, and he said to me, I am presently an atheist. Sometimes somebody speak a whole sentence, but one word screams out from that. So which was that? Presently. So I asked him, what do you mean by presently? He said, whenever I pray to God, if my prayer is fulfilled, I become a theist. If my prayer is not fulfilled, I become an atheist. So I told him, with all due respect, generally if anybody starts a sentence with all due respect, that means what is going to follow is not going to be very respectful. With all due respect, the existence or non-existence of God is independent of your belief in him. If he's there, he's there. If he's not there, he's not there. His existence of God is independent of the fulfillment or non-fulfillment of your desire. So if he's there, he's there. If he's not there, he's not there. So what did I asked him? So what happened? Why is it that you oscillate like this? So he said that it's very interesting what he told me. He said that when I grew up, like he came to a Christian family. So in Christianity, which is the biggest festival? Christmas. But you know, Christmas is less about Jesus Christ and is more about whom? Santa Claus. Yeah. So many kids grow up, unless they go to church and do some nativity scenes or the drama or something, most of them they don't know much about Jesus. They don't know about Santa Claus. So God becomes just like a bigger version of Santa Claus. And the idea is, I pray to God and God should fulfill my desires. If my desire is not fulfilled, then what is the use of God? So this is the level at which most people function. And I was in Varanasi. I don't know whether it was a joke, but there are many small temples of Hanuman in India. Like a small, on the floor, it's on the ground itself. By the side of a road, a small square is made. Inside there is a temple of Hanuman. There was this temple of Hanuman, and on top of that, there was a prayer written in Devanagari. तुम तो हो बाल ब्रह्मचारी, मुझे दे दो एक नारी. You are a celibate, please give me a woman. So quite often we consider God as relevant only if He is going to fulfill something for us. That's why what we are seeing is not God, we are seeing only our desires. Now, we can't tell people just give up all your desires, because it's very difficult. Our desires, at least some of them, are very deeply rooted. So what do the devotees do? They try to engage those desires in a way that we come closer to Krishna. So what happens? Srila Prabhupada was here. So basically we can say that we are here and there is a desirable object here. Something desirable is here. And Krishna is above us. So what happens is, if we can go here, well and good. If we can't go here, then we pray to Krishna so that we can come here. So, as in California, I saw an ad for an insurance company. The ad said, if you are not insured with us, it's time to say your prayers. So now, of course, our prayers are required all the time. But their idea is that if you have no arrangement, then only God only help you. So it's like that. So quite often we try to get things ourselves, we can't, we turn towards God. Now, this is, you could say this is materialism. Now this is pious or religious materialism, where we still want material things, but we want to go through God to get material things. Now, as contrasted with this, bhakti is slightly different. There are desirable things. Bhakti means we want to offer the desirable things in this world to Krishna. So for example, in India, it is often a royal tradition that many kings would build grand temples for the Lord. And especially if they would win a kingdom and they would get some treasury from the victory of the kingdom, then they would build a temple. Or if there was a deity in the kingdom which they had defeated, a prominent deity, they would get that deity and they would install that deity in their temple, in their kingdom. So that may that deity, we will serve you. So the idea was that there was some religious symbolism over there. It is not that, because every king would be considered as a representative of God, Naradev. And when, if there is a prominent temple and a prominent deity in a kingdom, so the idea was that it's not just two kings were fighting. It is often the idea was that I am fighting and the deity that I am worshipping is supporting me. And the deity that the other king is fighting is supporting you. That was the idea quite often. So then, but the idea was that it was not religious intolerance. It was not that I have defeated you, therefore my God has defeated you. But both sides thought that God is going to support them. So when one king would defeat the other king, there are some other religions where there is intolerance, where if they would defeat another army, they destroy the gods. But here the idea is that, I have been blessed and this is the kingdom, this was the deity that was worshipped, that was protecting this kingdom. So I am not here to offend you. I also want to serve you, I also want to worship you. So the idea was that the God element was still there. So whatever is good that we get, we try to do something good for it. So this is one way of practicing bhakti. So this is bhakti. But sometimes we may not be able to get desirable things. Then we offer our heart to Krishna. Even if we are not able to offer anything, we still offer our heart to Krishna. So the idea here is that both of these are ways in which we worship the Lord. So it is not told that you give up your desires, but rather have a desire to offer what you desire to Krishna, rather than using it for your own enjoyment. So now, when these young people were introduced by Srila Prabhupada to bhakti, they were young and adventurous and radical. So Prabhupada was looking for various ways to engage them in bhakti. And when he saw this flatbed truck, normally trucks have sides, and this was a flatbed truck, the sides had been taken out. Prabhupada was on the first floor in that center in San Francisco. And when he saw this flatbed truck, he immediately called this designer. He said, come here. He said, what? He said, can you hire a truck like this? Why would Swamiji want a truck? We have a car, we can drive with a car. Swami, no. Can you hire a truck like this? He said, on this truck, we will have a chariot festival. We'll have a Rath Yatra. And they had no idea what a Rath Yatra was. I said, okay, we'll arrange it. And then Prabhupada converted that chariot festival, that truck, into a chariot. And that's how the first Rath Yatra happened. And it was remarkable. Because say, the hippies, the people of the counterculture like to do extraordinary things. But dancing on the streets was far out even for them. In the past, if they would dance on streets, the police would come and arrest them. Now they were dancing on the streets and the police were escorting them. So, among all the things that Prabhupada had done, the Rath Yatra caught everyone's imagination in that. And it started in San Francisco, the first festival went, and then the devotees in other parts, they started doing it. And America had America till 1965, they had been religiously quite conservative, legally quite conservative. They started opening up a little bit more. So America, every city has sometimes this parade, that parade. So Rath Yatra was a parade. They had the parade, and then when the festival started, the devotees started doing these festivals, and wherever they went, this festival became like a spectacular success. So there were three kinds of people over there. The first kind of people who would, apart from the devotees who were dancing and singing and pulling the cart of Jagannath, and along with that, now none of them had much idea of the philosophical significance of that. They knew, okay, this is a traditional festival from India. And there were a few religious studies professors who also told, because when they would go for asking for permission in America, there was no Wikipedia or there was no ChatGPT at that time to ask. He says, we want to have a festival on the streets where we will dance in front of a truck. I said, what? They had no sense. In 1980s, there was a prominent American comedian, late 1980s. So he, once in a radio show, he asked people at that time, what is the list the 10 most outrageous things that you have heard? So he was looking more for like fodder for comedy. So at that time, something like 16% of his audience, among the 10 things that they had registered, was that they said one of the most outrageous things we have heard is a Hare Krishna devotee coming to us and telling that God is a bluish black cowherd boy. So it was completely far out for them. Howard, he later on was, when he was in New Vrindavan, he was teaching at the Ohio State University. So when he was teaching, one day his principal called him and he said, I've heard that you're teaching students have a strange conception of God. And he was a bit cheeky. So he said, what is your conception of God? He said, I am an atheist, I have no conception of God. If you have no conception, then how can you call my conception strange? Okay, but you are telling that God is black. This was the time when the racial tensions were in America, were white and black. You are saying God is black? He said, no, God is blue. Now, but in America, in the West, blue is often associated with depression. Like he's got the blues. You have heard that phrase? Blues means somebody is depressed or down. God is blue. Just couldn't get it. And then, I heard you're saying God is a cowboy. They are the image of a Dallas cowboy or something like that. And he says, no, he's not a cowboy, he's a cowherd boy. So everything was quite extraordinary for them at that time. But the thing is that for the devotees, the more extraordinary it was, the more adventurous it became. And the more adventurous it became, the more they just embraced it. They just took it up enthusiastically. And then let's conclude with two things, two incidents more. So some of the devotees, so from San Francisco, the festival spread all over America. There were devotees in Canada. The festival spread to Canada also. When Prabhupada went to America, he was on a 2-month visa. And he kept extending the visa. 2 months, 2 months, 2 months, it went on. And finally the government said, we are not going to extend your visa. So then the devotee couple who was trying to arrange for a legal visa, Prabhupada told them, I have a solution. Yes. He says, you adopt me as your son. Now, they were of the age of his grandchildren, Prabhupada was 70 and they were 20, 25, 20, 25, something like that. Then Prabhupada had almost decided that he would relocate to Montreal. Canada, the visa was relatively easy to get. So I have been to Montreal and there's a room there. We still have that temple, the same room. But that Prabhupada was there in that room. Prabhupada said, I'll make Montreal our international headquarters. And we'll preach from here. So Prabhupada was planning that. But then in one Rath Yatra festival in America, the devotees, because the Rath Yatra festivals were like quite big. So a lot of people would come. And sometimes the devotees would not be able to keep track also who is coming. So but in one Rath Yatra festival, there's one celebrity. A minor celebrity, but in those circles is a big celebrity. As Allen Ginsberg, he came there. See, the idea of a celebrity is sometimes that you can say, you can tell the audience, you may not know this person, but he's very famous. So you may not know, but he's famous. So it's like that, famous in a particular circle, but not in other circles. So anyway, so when he himself had been attracted to the Hare Krishna mantra before only, and he would sing in a different tune. But when he met Prabhupada, he felt very attracted to Prabhupada because he just said, I like this mantra, I like singing this, but I don't know anything about it. And Swamiji knew the theology, the philosophy behind it. So he talked with Prabhupada and he says, can I help Swamiji in any way? And the devotee said that Prabhupada is having some visa issues. He says, oh, that I can take care, I'll tell my attorney to talk with you. And he gave the contact of the attorney, and then that attorney worked it out. Now, the legal system is, in America, it's quite intricate, so which application you make, how you make, so they took care of that. That's how Prabhupada could stay on over there. So, in one sense, you can say that Prabhupada brought Jagannath to America, and Jagannath ensured that Prabhupada stayed in America. So it was through Rath Yatra that Prabhupada met Allen Ginsberg, and then after that, he started spreading abroad. So then some devotees went to London. And initially they had great difficulties. But eventually they met George Harrison over there. And George Harrison was the biggest musical celebrity at those times. So it was like say in Indian say you consider Bollywood, there are movie stars. But say Amitabh Bachchan is considered one of the biggest stars. So it was like bigger than that in the music scene. The devotees met him and he was already singing Hare Krishna. Because he had come to India and he had met some Indian swamis, so he had attracted them. So then through that the movement started spreading quite nicely. And then the devotees decided to do Rath Yatra in London. So last year I was in London at around this time and the devotees do Rath Yatra at that time in London. It's magnificent. There's Trafalgar Square is the biggest square is one of the biggest squares in London, and there's a Nelson Tower. It's quite tall. And so the Rath Yatra is, the devotees made Rath Yatra so large that the Rath Yatra spire was taller than the Nelson Tower. And it became a sensation. And it's now become a part of the cultural calendar of London. Every year they have Rath Yatra. So, but initially when the devotees started, they decided that let's do something big. And they decided to do a big Rath Yatra. Big Rath they made. But the devotees were a bit inexperienced. So they made a big Rath, but they did not make the wheels big enough. And the Rath went a little distance and then it collapsed. The top part started collapsing. And now the devotees panicked. But nobody knew what the Rath Yatra was. So there were visitors there were journalists there. And one of the devotees got the idea. They said, the collapsing of the Rath is part of the festival. And they continued on. But still, it was quite demoralizing for them. So they wrote to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was not there at that time for the Yatra. They wrote to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, did the Rath collapse because of our poor devotion? And Prabhupada wrote back, it collapsed because of your poor engineering. So, we want to serve Krishna, but still, we have to do things at a material level with some competence. Say if somebody does not know cooking at all, and they say, I'll cook for a festival. And they start cooking. Now, they do it very devotionally. They have kirtan going on, they pray to Krishna, they cook, but they just don't know cooking. And, Krishna will be pleased by their cooking. And only Krishna will be pleased. So, suppose you got a heart attack and there are two heart surgeons. One devotee surgeon and another is not a devotee. Whom would you go to?
Experienced one.
Yeah, who is the better one? Suppose you go to the devotee surgeon and say, he says, I will make sure that when I am doing surgery, I am chanting Hare Krishna. That's okay, but will you do the surgery properly? So I can't guarantee that, but I guarantee I will chant Hare Krishna. You will say, I want to go back to Krishna, but not so soon. So the idea is that even when we are serving Krishna, certain level of material competence is important. But anyway, the next year the devotees did festival. They did it very carefully. Prabhupada also came. And Prabhupada was actually quite sick at that time. Prabhupada said, I'll just come in a car and I'll take darshan of Jagannath and I'll go back and I'll come at the festival place just to give a brief talk. When Prabhupada came out of his house, the very place where he was staying, he could not even walk. He had to use a stick and he was heavily leaning on the stick to walk. But when he came there on the streets and he saw hundreds of devotees chanting, hundreds of people chanting and singing, devotee leading kirtan, Jagannath on the Jagannath Yatra, tall, towering on the streets of London. Prabhupada just got a surge of spiritual energy. And Prabhupada opened the car door, came out. And Prabhupada went in front of Jagannath, offered obeisances, got up and started dancing. And when Prabhupada started dancing, the whole crowd went crazy. And then, the police over there had planned the cart would keep moving. But Prabhupada was not moving at all. So the cops, they came. I think, what is the word they use in UK for? In America they use cops. Bobby, no? Yeah, so the bobbies, they came. And they looked around, who is in charge? So, everybody looked same to them. All devotees, if you see. I was reading one Christian book on the existence of God. They're saying that everything is individual. Everything is different. He says, two flakes of snow may look alike, but they're different. Two shells on the beach course, they may look identical, but they're different. Two leaves on a tree, they may look similar, but they're different. So it's like that. Two Hare Krishna monks may look similar, but they're different. So, but for them, everybody looks similar. So the bobbies were coming and telling, hey, you have to move on. And all that would happen, the devotee would hear that, nobody was going to tell Prabhupada to move, you have to move. So all that would, that devotee would just move, I'm not in charge. And everybody was telling. And finally, he wanted to go and tell, he saw that everybody looking at Prabhupada, he said, maybe I'll go and tell Prabhupada. So he started going toward Prabhupada. And as soon as he started going toward Prabhupada, all the devotees converged around Prabhupada, they started dancing. They just kept dancing, and Prabhupada just manifested such energy. Later on, Prabhupada said that when the British had come to India, see, at that time, for them, many of the things in India they just could not comprehend. But when they saw the worship of Jagannath, that was especially with the Christian missionaries, they said this is just a wooden statue, and there are thousands of people worshipping this pagan god. So they said that the success of Christianity will be when this pagan ritual, this pagan worship stops forever. So this was their mood, and they were often very, very critical of that. And Prabhupada grew up, when Prabhupada grew up in India at that time, the good college, schools and colleges were Christian or Catholic or convent colleges. So Prabhupada went to a college at a Scottish Church College. And there also he heard some of the Christian missionary criticism of Jagannath. So Prabhupada later said that the British, they wanted to stop the worship of Jagannath in India. But Jagannath's mercy is that now in London, Jagannath's worship is going on. So that is the mercy of, that is the magic of Jagannath, and that is the mercy of Jagannath that is bestowed on all of us. So that is the festival. A traditional festival is wonderful, but what manifested because of Srila Prabhupada was just as, if not even more wonderful. And when we talk about Prabhupada's manifesting this festival, one more point I'll add and I'll conclude that many devotees, when they were there, they said that it was amazing how things would work. We would just go and tell somebody about a book and people would take a book. We would go and ask for permission and people would just give. So it was extraordinary how things seem to be working. So it is, like if we go to many of the ISKCON temples, let's put a not very good drawer. So this is Krishna and this is Srila Prabhupada. And now what happens is, in our temples, we have Krishna on one side and Prabhupada on one side. So the idea is that in the temple, there is a constant loving exchange going on between the Lord and his devotee. And when we come here in between, like sometimes there's gang violence going on and two people are shooting each other, somebody gets caught in the crossfire. So, but for that's unfortunate. But when we go to a temple, there is this cross current of love going on, and we get caught in the cross current, but we get blessed by that cross current. So Prabhupada is lovingly glancing at Krishna, Krishna is lovingly glancing at Prabhupada. So what happened in the temple, that was also his part of the history of the movement. So Prabhupada wanted to please Krishna. Prabhupada wanted to do wonderful things for Krishna. And Krishna wanted to glorify Prabhupada. And thus, those devotees who tried and took up the responsibility of trying to serve Srila Prabhupada, they got caught in this cross current of mercy from both sides. And many devotees said that we felt that we were like accidental beneficiaries. So, we like this, we got in this accidental beneficiaries. So we just happened to be there, and from both sides we get mercy. So for all of us, we in the Krishna consciousness movement, we also have the opportunity to become accidental beneficiaries. Srila Prabhupada wanted to share Krishna with everyone, and Krishna wants to please Srila Prabhupada. So if we take up the opportunity, if we take up the responsibility to try to serve, whether it is by making our home into a temple, whether it is by talking with our family and inspiring our family to practice bhakti, whether it is with our neighbors, with our relatives, whether we come and do some service in the temple, whatever we do, we'll find that what would be ordinarily possible or impossible for us, those conceptions will by Krishna's mercy be put aside. And each one of us, we can find extraordinary changes happening in our outer world and in our inner world. Sometimes they may happen immediately, sometimes they may take some time. But these will happen to us. And the Jagannath festival that is now going on all over the world is a demonstration of the wonders that can manifest in this world when the devotee desires earnestly to serve the Lord and other devotees take up the desire as their own desire. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Karya Aikya. So if we take up the desire of a devotee and try to fulfill that desire, then we become empowered by Krishna. In that way, our heart gets transformed and we get empowered to transform at least our corner of the world. That way the Lord of the universe, the Lord is always the Lord of the universe. But when we worship the Lord of the universe, what we are doing is, the Lord of the universe becomes more and more the Lord of our heart. And thus Jagannath, he becomes the Nath of our heart. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. I talked about Prabhupada and Rath Yatra. That is the broad theme. Rath Yatra has a wonderful historical context, but we focus more on the contemporary history of Rath Yatra. We talk about Srila Prabhupada's context first, that he had an extremely difficult situation where he had no support from India, no audience, at least no respectable or respectful audience, and then no reliable followers. But when he got something, then he took that up. No Indian support, no respectable followers. But still, in that context, Prabhupada took what he could take. The Prabhupada was an essence seeker, bhavagrahi. So what he saw was that there is something wonderful, because these hippies, counterculture, they were spiritually interested, even though they were materially very unlikely seeming to practice bhakti. So what did Srila Prabhupada do? Prabhupada engaged them. And we talked about how bhakti starts in many different ways. Normally most people are materialistic. Whatever they desire, whatever is desirable for them, they seek that. And for them, God is a means to seek that. But if they don't get it, how do we engage and elevate such people? The idea is encourage them, whatever you desire to do, you do it for Krishna. So that is, and then ultimately after that, you offer the heart to Krishna. So for the hippies, what they desired was to do something radical, to do something adventurous. So when the Rath Yatra festival started, what Prabhupada did was that dancing on the streets and being escorted by the police. That was something even they could not have dreamt of. It was so far out. Prabhupada did that. So the mood of Acharya is not that the Guru is here and the disciple is here and the Guru says, remember Krishna. Rather, the Guru also gives facilities, creates facilities to remember Krishna. So the facilities to create remember Krishna means that we talk about two kinds of facilities. There is the ordinary, where by doing something regularly, it just becomes slowly and subtly fit into our mind as a part of our mental architecture itself. And it also the extraordinary, where some festivals, they break the daily routine and then we experience Krishna in a memorable way. So both of these are ways in which we remember Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada, for him, Rath Yatra was this kind of extraordinary festival. And then lastly we discussed about how Rath Yatra spread in adventurous ways across the world. So Srila Prabhupada brought Jagannath and he celebrated Jagannath in America. And Jagannath arranged for Prabhupada to stay on in America also. So there was this loving exchange between Jagannath and Prabhupada. And what we saw was Jagannath, Prabhupada was serving Jagannath, Jagannath was arranging for Prabhupada things. So we can all be caught in the cross current of mercy. So the Krishna conscious movement spread, where often devotees may not have been very qualified themselves, but their qualification was that they want to serve Srila Prabhupada and Krishna empowered them. So we all can be blessed by this cross current of mercy, and in that way we can transform both by that mercy at one level our heart and our world, or at least our corner of the world. This is how each one of us, what we draw from Jagannath and Jagannath Yatra festival and the history of it is that the miracle and the magic of mercy is still very much alive, and we all can experience it by our practice of it. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.